Dracula, the blood drinker. In India they'd call him Rakshasa. In China, Shang-Chi. In Russia, Birdlock. In Romania, Strigoi. In ancient Greece, Lamia. All around the world are different stories, myths, and legends that all trace back to a single idea: vampire. But where did all these ideas come from? What do they all have in common? Their origin. A deadly genetic mutation that has appeared all around the world since as far back as 3000 BC and has killed millions. The root of all these stories is VV.
Every country around the world has a blood drinker myth, whether they call them demons, monsters, or vampires. But the discovery of VV was a lot more recent than all of those myths, and it all started with a skeleton. The discovery of Skeleton X was a mystery. Two teenagers in Columbia, Georgia stumbled across a skeleton in the local reservoir, and upon inspection, discovered that the skeleton had fangs. Most people thought it was a joke, or a prank, but after careful study at various universities, they concluded that the skeleton's fangs are real, and that they've grown in just like real teeth do. But a closer examination of the skeleton would reveal something even deadlier than fangs.
It wasn't just that the skeleton had fangs, its bones were different. We didn't notice it at first. It was so similar to what we expected to find.
It mimicked the normal collagen and contained all the amino acids it was supposed to, but with one distinction. There was an unidentified substance in it that made it stronger, harder to break.
The new substance was labeled V for the 5 molecules that make it.
Once we saw it in Skeleton X, we started seeing it everywhere. There were thousands of skeletons that all had V in their bones that were previously thought to have died from different things. But none of them had the fangs present in Skeleton X.
There's been hypotheses that the first case actually came from bats, much like other diseases start in animals and spread to humans.
But VV does things differently. It develops as a DNA mutation, yet usually happens in large population bursts, as though it's spreading. No one's quite sure why, since all the evidence says it's not contagious.
The way an organism usually works is your DNA contains the information for the creation of all the protein that make up you. If it gets corrupted or you inherit a mutation, your cells start creating abnormal protein, which can kill you. Proteins are made up of 32 different amino acids in different orders and amounts. VV doesn't just infect your DNA, it also creates an entirely new amino acid which it adds to all of the polypeptide chains. It also increases the rate of cell division and protein synthesis so that it spreads even faster. It would start with general aches and pains. As the abnormal proteins started to spread, the increased chemical reactions would cause a fever, and over time the pain would just get worse as the abnormal proteins were rejected by your body. They would start to develop new allergies, as well as start hallucinating occasionally. One that got attributed to the vampire myth quite notably was one woman who claimed she couldn't see her reflection in the mirror.
The skin would turn more grayish. Often they would cough up blood and their gums would bleed. This was the symptom that most led to the vampire myth. Because their bodies would try to form fangs but would fail, their gums would bleed instead, making it look like they'd been sucking blood. Eventually, the abnormal protein would reach a major organ and shut it down.
But it seems that not all the cases were as life-threatening as the rest.
There were a few that survived, and these survivors are what made the vampire myth.
Skeleton X was one of these survivors in the 15th century.
It would be different for them, but it would start out the same, with aches, a fever, new allergies, and hallucinations. But they would adapt, often going into a coma for a week during the process.
There were actually a few cases where the person died, but then rose from the grave. With modern science, we know that they hadn't really died. The adaptation coma was mistaken for death.
It's thought to be caused by a separate genetic mutation that allows them to adapt to their amino acid. The adapting causes the fangs to grow and the theory to become better, just like a bat.
These additions made it possible to spread the disease, but with one key difference. The adaptation mutation could be spread with it, allowing for survival if it worked.
Nearing the end of the 15th century, we started to see a decline in cases until eventually they stopped appearing altogether.
After a large death count, the disease lay dormant for hundreds of years, until 1998 when it resurfaced in Turkey, and most of them survived.
There were a few people that didn't, as with all diseases. There was a lack of health care and poverty, but for the most part, there was a 95% chance that the person lived.
But the people of today still face the same fears as the people of the past. Victims were quickly shunned by their neighbors and families because they were afraid to catch it as well. And then when they survived, they were different. Other people noticed and attacked them. Protests broke out against the government for their lack of action, and as the disease spread, more and more survivors were made. With the recent rise of vampire movies, fan clubs were even formed in the honor of some of the survivors. The cause of the resurgence is unclear, but with 65% of the world infected, it's spreading even faster now. Until more research is done, there's really no way to know the cause.